The movie starts in a futuristic city in Hokkaido, Japan, where AI has advanced so much that humans and robots live together seamlessly. We meet Ken Kasugai, an unemployed man who spends most of his time playing video games. One morning, while Ken is immersed in a game, his wife Emmy interrupts him. She tells him there's a strange robot in their backyard and asks him to get rid of it. But Ken, uninterested, keeps playing, which annoys Emmy. She scolds him for being jobless and unhelpful around the house. Frustrated, she asks about the job interview he had the previous day, but Ken avoids the topic and leaves the house. In the backyard, Ken finds the strange robot sitting under a tree. When he asks who it is, the robot gets startled and flips over. After a bit of back and forth, the robot introduces itself as Tang. It has no idea where it came from and seems to have lost its memory. Ken introduces himself, and Tang starts repeating his words in broken Japanese. Ken takes Tang to a scrapyard to get rid of it. The scrapyard owner mentions he'll strip the robot for parts, so Ken decides to leave it there. As Ken walks away, Tang calls out to him repeatedly, but Ken ignores it. However, Tang quickly escapes the scrapyard and starts following him. Later, Emmy gets a call from the hospital where Ken was supposed to interview for an intern position. To her shock, she finds out he never showed up. Just then, Ken arrives home, followed by Tang. The robot curiously looks at the family photos and starts taking tissues from the table, oddly attracted to Emmy's belongings. Enraged, Emmy confronts Ken about skipping the job interview. Ken casually says he forgot, assuring her that they have enough money from his father's inheritance. This frustrates Emmy even more. She expresses how exhausted she is with his immature behavior. In her anger, she grabs an antique clock, a keepsake from Ken's late father, and smashes it. Ken is deeply hurt, but Emmy tells him it's time to grow up and move on. She then kicks him out of the house, with Tang loyally following behind. Interestingly, Tang secretly pockets a photo of Emmy, along with the tissues. At a bus stop, Ken sulks about his situation and wonders what to do next. He notices some liquid leaking from Tang and opens its hatch. Inside, he finds Autobot Systems, written on a component, a company known for making top-quality androids. Searching the company's website, Ken discovers they're offering new robots in exchange for old ones. Thinking this might win Emmy's forgiveness, he decides to trade Tang for a better model that can help around the house. Ken and Tang travel to Fukuoka to visit the Autobot Systems headquarters. On the plane, a mischievous child throws candy at Ken. When Ken tells him to stop, the child continues, and Tang copies Ken by calling the child a brat repeatedly, creating an awkward situation. Frustrated, Ken snaps at Tang, calling it trash and threatening to throw it away. This upsets Tang, causing it to release steam from its head. At the Autobot office, Ken tries to trade Tang for a new robot. However, the receptionist informs him that Tang isn't part of their system, as it only contains some of their parts. She apologizes, saying they can't process the exchange. Meanwhile, Shinji, a chief robot designer at Autobot, is giving a tour to children when they spot Tang. The kids are fascinated and take pictures, and Tang shows kindness by rescuing a ladybug about to be stepped on. Shinji, impressed, asks to examine Tang, and Ken agrees. In his office, Shinji discovers a glass tube filled with yellow fluid inside Tang. He notices the tube is cracked, causing the fluid, Tang's fuel, to leak. He temporarily fixes it and warns Ken that Tang will shut down if the fluid runs out. Shinji also observes that Tang seems highly intelligent and capable of emotions, almost like a human. He tells Ken that Tang is special and urges him to take care of it. Shinji mentions his friend Atsuki Rin, a robotics expert in Shenzhen, China. He suggests Ken visit her to fix Tang properly. Ken is annoyed by the idea of traveling that far, but reluctantly agrees after Shinji insists it's the only way to save Tang. Later, two mysterious men arrive at the Autobot office, demanding Tang's location. A frightened Shinji gives them the information. Meanwhile, Ken and Tang arrive in Shenzhen and visit Atsuki. She's thrilled to see Tang and warmly hugs it, saying she's been waiting for this moment. While they talk, Tang spots a remote-controlled car and chases it, only to fall into a trap. The mysterious men lock Tang in a van and drive off. Realizing what's happened, Atsuki and Ken chase the van but can't catch up. Luckily, Atsuki throws her ID card with a GPS tracker into the van. Meanwhile, someone is monitoring everything through Tang's camera. That evening, Ken and Atsuki track the van to a warehouse. At this moment, Ken gets a call from Emmy. She tells him she can't babysit him anymore and admits she feels better without him around. She adds that since the house belongs to Ken's parents, she'll leave instead. Ken is stunned by her words and feels devastated. Ken respects her decision and lets her go. But after hanging up, we see that Emmy is deeply unhappy. She breaks down in tears, regretting her choice. Meanwhile, Ken brushes off his emotions and focuses on the mission. At the warehouse, Ken and Atsuki notice the kidnappers lounging around and heading upstairs to grab some beers. Taking advantage of the situation, they quickly grab Tang and try to leave. However, their escape is interrupted by Dr. Kato, the boss of the kidnappers, who stops them. He examines Tang and immediately recognizes the components, realizing that Professor Baba must have created the robot. Soon after, Kato's two henchmen arrive and capture Tang. Ken pretends to dismiss Tang, claiming the robot is just junk he wants to get rid of. Hearing this, Tang becomes enraged and releases steam from its body, causing confusion among the henchmen, who accidentally let it go. It turns out this was all part of Ken's plan to create a distraction. Taking the opportunity, Ken and Atsuki fight off the kidnappers. Atsuki manages to grab a taser gun, knock out one of the henchmen, and threaten the others, urging Ken to escape with Tang. Ken and Tang manage to escape, but Ken notices that Tang is leaking fuel. He then receives a video call from an unknown number. When he answers, it's Professor Baba, Tang's creator, who is thrilled to see his creation. He calls Tang James and thanks Ken for taking care of him. Baba invites them to Makakujima Island, where he promises to fix Tang and reveals that the robot has the power to change the world. Ken and Tang travel to Makakujima and admire its beautiful scenery. During a quiet moment, Ken opens up to Tang about his traumatic past. He shares that he once wanted to be a doctor and even worked as a medical intern. However, one day his father had a medical emergency, and since no doctors were available, the nurses asked Ken for help. Overwhelmed with fear, he froze and couldn't act. By the time a doctor arrived, it was too late, and his father had passed away. Since then, Ken has lost confidence in himself and given up on his career, feeling like a failure who has let his wife down. Hearing this, Tang sympathizes with Ken and does a cheerful dance to cheer him up, which makes Ken laugh. They finally arrive at Baba's house, where the professor warmly welcomes them and thanks Ken for bringing Tang back. Baba replaces Tang's leaking fuel tube with a new one filled with bioethanol derived from sugarcane. However, Tang is visibly scared of the professor and hides behind Ken. Despite this, Ken feels he isn't in a position to keep Tang and decides to leave. Tang clings to Ken, begging him to stay, but Ken walks away with a heavy heart. On his way out, Ken runs into Dr. Kato, who is heading toward Baba's house. Kato becomes alarmed when he learns that Ken has handed Tang over to Baba. He then reveals a dark secret. 5 years ago, Kato worked with Baba on the James Robot series, a military project. During a training session, one of the robots developed emotions, panicked, and attacked everyone. Baba saw this as a breakthrough in artificial intelligence and wanted to claim the achievement for himself. He removed the robot's Eurochip, transferred it to another creation, and set fire to the lab to cover his tracks. Since then, Kato and his team have been hunting Baba to bring him to justice. Alarmed by this revelation, Ken takes Kato's car and rushes back to Baba's house. Meanwhile, Baba attempts to extract Tang's Eurochip, but the terrified robot runs away. Ken arrives just in time and sneaks into the lab, finding Tang. They try to escape, but Baba locks all the doors. Kato arrives outside but can't get in. Baba reveals that he has been monitoring Ken through Tang's camera. He taunts Ken, calling him a loser stuck in the past, and reveals his plan to use Tang's intelligence to gain global power. Baba then approaches Tang with a hatchet, but Ken steps in to protect his friend. The professor sneers, questioning why Ken would defend a mere machine. Ken firmly replies that Tang is his friend. Baba attacks with a robotic arm, but Ken and Tang manage to overpower him. Ken knocks Baba unconscious with the robotic arm. Just when the danger seems over, a heavy cupboard falls, crushing Tang. Ken rushes to help, but finds the robot leaking fuel and unable to move. Desperate, Ken tries replacing the fuel tube, but Tang doesn't wake up. Ken calls Kato for help. Kato instructs him to check the battery cable, which turns out to be broken. Ken fixes it, but then faces a critical choice. There are two sockets, and only Baba knows the correct one. If Ken chooses wrong, Tang will be destroyed. Haunted by memories of his father's death, Ken hesitates, but ultimately takes a leap of faith. His guess is correct, and Tang wakes up. However, Tang introduces himself as James, having lost his memories. Heartbroken, Ken recounts their journey together, and surprisingly, Tang's memories return. Tang calls Ken by name and says, "I love you." Overjoyed, Ken responds, "I love you too." In the final scene, the police arrive to arrest Baba. Ken returns home with Tang and finds his wife, Sei, about to leave. He notices that she has repaired his father's antique clock, which touches him deeply. Though scared to speak up, Ken plays a recording of himself, made by Tang, where he promises to pursue his dreams again and become a better husband. Moved by his words, Sei forgives him. Ken tearfully apologizes and vows to improve. The movie ends with the couple sharing a heartfelt kiss as Tang watches, its eyes covered with a cloth.